Welcome, everyone, to today's session of our Fall 2023 series of Tuesday Times Roundtable. Today's session, Social and Economic Impacts of Immigrant Communities in Florida. My name is Michelle Zaldivar, your Senior Program Coordinator here at the Office of Global Learning Initiatives. TTR is our flagship discussion series that brings together multiple perspectives on current global issues and trends. You can learn more about TTR, watch past recordings, or come back and reference this one at go.fiu.edu/TTR. As we engage in today's session, we ask that everyone please use the mic. We'll have some roaming mics going around the side, so when we get to audience participation to the discussion, so that we can hear your contributions on that recording. If you haven't already, please take a moment to sign in. The QR code up here on the board and those posted around the room are all the same. Medallion students, take a screenshot of that sign-in so that you can use that as a verification log on your points log for submission. If you'd like to learn more about the opportunities at the Office of Global Learning Initiatives, including our Excellence in Global Learning Medallion and Peace Corps PLEP, please hang out after the session. We'll be here. The graduate assistants that you met out in the front will also be here to answer any of your questions. TTR is always grounded in a global issue and trend and is always linked to an article where you can learn more. You can read today's article, for the article for this week's session, at go.fiu.edu/TTR1024. FIU provides anyone with an @fiu.edu email address free digital access to the New York Times. If you haven't already, you can activate your subscription at accessnyt.com. Our session today is led by the team at the Florida Immigrant Coalition. David Metellus, did I say that right? I did not say that right.
Say Metellus.
Metellus. David Metellus is a proud son of Haitian immigrants from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. David is an experienced political strategist, policy analyst, and business owner. His policy experiences range from the federal, state, and municipal levels, having worked for members of the U.S. House of Representatives and the United States Senate, along with legislative agencies in the Florida legislature and municipalities across Florida. Ana Maria Hernandez is the field director of the Florida Immigrant Coalition Votes. She is driven by her passion for community empowerment and social change and has years of experience organizing, focusing on the education and mobilizing diverse and underrepresented communities to participate in our democracy. She was born in Medellin, Colombia, and immigrated to the United States at 10 years old. Her activism started back then, and today she spends time fighting for immigrant rights, reproductive rights, LGBTQIA+ rights, recovery rights, climate justice, and more. She went to the University of South Florida for her degree in political science, and for the last several years has been working on issue-based electoral work. Please join me in welcoming our panelists for today, David and Ana Maria.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you, Michelle, for the invitation and for the introductions. I'm Ana Maria, and this is David, and we are here with the Florida Immigrant Coalition. Oh, we already... So before we begin, let's do a little grounding. So raise your hand if you yourself are an immigrant or maybe a child of immigrants. Okay, so most people in the room. Raise your hand if you know people that may be in the country without documentation. So a lot of people in the room. Raise your hand if you hang out with, love people that are immigrants. Yeah, everybody. So part of the reason why is because there's a really, really big percentage of immigrant communities here in our state. So would somebody that raised their hands as being an immigrant themselves or a child of immigrants maybe want to share a little bit about what industries maybe your family works in?
Hello. Okay, there we go. So my mom is a chemical analyst, and my dad is a systems engineer. They're both in Michigan right now, and that's the reason why we moved. My whole family is because of their jobs.
Oh, very nice. So you came into the state so that your parents could work here.
Exactly.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. What about you?
Hi, my name is Lara.
I'm Venezuelan. I came when I was 12 years old. In Venezuela, my mom was a lawyer and my dad was an IT expert. Here, as the story goes, you know, we have different lives. My mom administers a retreat house and my dad is working in the IT field.
Very nice, very cool. Yeah, my story is a little bit similar to yours too. My mom is an engineer in Colombia, and here she worked as a chef. She found her passion though, so that's good. Thank you both for sharing. And what has anyone that would like to share, what has that immigrant experience been like for you and your families living in Florida? Any challenges, any really big successes?
Hi, everyone. I'm myself am not an immigrant. I was born in this country, but I am the child of two people that also came from Colombia. In my household, I would say the common thread for the last 20 years of my life is navigating the cultural and like language differences that there are in the States. Right now, my family, we're lucky to be doing pretty well for ourselves, but it wasn't always easy. And growing up, I remember, you know, always being asked, like, how do you say this? Or, you know, getting asked questions about things that as a child, like, I had no idea about. But yeah, mostly navigating the language and the cultural differences, I think, for me is the defining thing.
Who can relate to that? Yeah, a lot of us in the room. How can we? Thank you. And the reason for that is that here in the state of Florida, we have a very, very large number of immigrant communities, of immigrant people that live in this state. So more than 1 in 5 residents in Florida is an immigrant. So over 20% of our population was born outside of the US. And a big percentage of this population, about 57%, we identify as Hispanic or Latino. So we are a big portion. And is that surprising to anybody? No, looking around the room alone, it's not a surprise. And a lot of immigrants that come to the United States are entrepreneurs, and they bring about $8.1 billion in revenue to the state of Florida, which is huge. We are a huge economic power. And not just that, but we have really great representation in some of Florida's biggest industries like construction, tourism, the professional careers, right? Entertainment and recreation, agriculture, right? Farming is a really, really big one. So we have really big representation in our state. And because of this, we actually make up about 25% of the Florida's GDP in 2019, right? So the immigrant labor force has a huge impact on the Florida economy. So what do you all feel is the political climate around immigration right now? Any thoughts? Do you feel very welcomed?
Hi again. I feel like it's very much polarized. You either support it or you don't. And there are many reasons that both sides have. I mean, like, not everyone asks the immigrant what it's like to immigrate. So everybody has an opinion. And yeah, at least politically, like, it's very shifting.
Yes, it has become a jaded subject, right? Anybody else have any opinions?
I can add something. If not.
Go ahead.
I feel like it's also kind of racist because we talked about it last week's session. Like, I'm an immigrant, but I used to be an immigrant in Switzerland too, and they call white immigrants expats. But if you are not white, then you're an immigrant. Or like if you look like us, whatever that means, they are not as prejudicial as then if you don't look like a typical, I don't know. It's like hard to phrase it, but like I feel like it is, especially here in the U.S. It is kind of racist.
Yeah, there is a lot of prejudice whenever it comes to the topic. You're absolutely right. Go ahead.
I think when you talk about this, you also have to mention legality. A lot of people who came to this country legally, myself included, don't feel it's fair that people get to come in illegally and stay illegally.
Yeah, there is a lot of division around that topic as well, right? But you know, Florida was not always this, there was not always this animosity towards this topic. And with this, I will turn it over to David to give us a little bit of the context.
Thank you, Ana Maria. As Ana Maria was saying, Florida hasn't always been the way that it is right now. When you look back, a past couple of governors, we had Governor Jeb Bush, who was a very openly pro-immigrant governor. He supported a pathway to citizenship and those policies. And then when we get to after Governor Jeb Bush, you get to Rick Scott, who was less sort of politically, he was more supportive of immigrants than he is now. He extended in-state tuition to undocumented immigrants, and he made it possible for immigrants to practice law in Florida, for undocumented folks to be able to become licensed attorneys. So it is a very different context than we have right now when we talk about what was just passed. Did it change? Oh, it did. And when we talk about most recently what is passed in Florida, when we talk about SB 1718. So after Governor Jeb Bush and after Rick Scott, then we have nationally, you have President Donald Trump who comes into play. And so during his presidency, he really shifted the tide of just where the bipartisan consensus was on immigration, and a lot of the values and beliefs that people had around immigration really began to erode. And I think you see the traces of that in Florida specifically when you look at a county like Miami-Dade and sort of how the political winds has begun to shift in this county, and just throughout the state of Florida, how the political winds have begun to shift and the policies that are able to get through. And so when you had Donald Trump in office, you had different things like the travel ban, which targeted different Muslim countries and other countries as well, countries that they labeled as being socialist or being dangerous to the country. And these are things that traditionally wouldn't get through and traditionally wouldn't be supported in a more traditional democracy, in a more traditional political context. And so that's sort of the long arc of how immigration has changed throughout this country, and how Florida has been affected by that. What we do see a lot of times in the national trends is that Florida often is a bellwether of sort of how things are changing nationally and how things are affected nationally. And so when we get back to Florida, sort of talking about the distribution of power and how things get passed in Florida, and once we understand the current context that we're in, so the distribution of power after the 2022 midterm election where Governor DeSantis was reelected. After that, there was what's called, well, let me give you the distribution of power. So in the Senate, we have 40 seats, 28 are Republican, 12 are held by Democrats. In the House of Representatives, you have 120, 85 are held by Republicans, and 35 are held by Democrats. And so that's what you call a supermajority, for those of you who may not follow politics specifically. When 2/3 of the chamber is controlled by one party, they have a supermajority, and they're able to just sort of usher things through just without bipartisan consensus at that point, because when you have 2/3 majority, it's basically considered as consensus in the legislative body, and you're able to just move things through that way. And so with one party holding 2/3 of the seats, and with the political context that we were just talking about changing, that's how we were able to pass through sort of SB 1718, which what I call is the anti-immigrant omnibus that was passed last legislative session. How many people have heard of SB 1718? Has anybody heard of SB 1718?
What have you heard?
Just go out, you can say it. What have you heard about it? Anyone that raised their hand?
I heard that hospitals have to ask for an immigration status before they can provide you care. And if you do not, you can provide like a legal status, they have to call the police on you.
Well, that's let me clarify that that's not completely, that's partially true. And I think that's part of the work that we did, is really educating folks and battling the misinformation that was out there. So what it is that medical institutions, emergency departments and medical institutions that accept Medicaid, they have to ask that, sort of legal status. On the intake form, they have to ask a question. Are you an American citizen? Are you undocumented? Or do you decline to answer? And so that's what it has to say on the intake form. And then what they have to do is essentially the hospitals have to report that to ACA, and ACA has to report that to the legislature on a yearly basis. And so the distinction I do want to make is that they cannot deny you your medical care. They can't deny your medical care just no matter what your immigration status is. And so that's just that final piece there. They do have to collect that information, but in no circumstance can they deny you a medical care, and you can actually decline to answer that form, right? And so that's why I said there are three things that are on there. Are you American citizen? Are you undocumented? Or you decline to answer? And we actually have a decline to answer campaign where we're basically telling folks, both American citizen and undocumented folks, just decline to answer this question, because what is basically being used is to, the data gets submitted to the legislature, and they basically try to use it to target resources in the communities to either take them away or whatever it is based on the usage of undocumented folks. They call it the public charge.
Yeah, so that is a super important, crucial point for everyone to go out and share with everyone you know. Right now, hospitals and medical facilities are required to ask about immigration status, but none of us are required to answer, and all of us must decline. That is how we protect our communities. That is how we protect resources continuing to come into our hospitals, into our districts. So we must all decline to answer, and so that we can protect ourselves.
So somebody over here, what have you heard about SB 1718?
Thing I've heard is that if you transport like an immigrant that isn't here legally, then you could face like a sentence, like a prison sentence.
Yeah, and that's another thing that was in the bill. I want to clarify that one as well. And so what the original language was is that anybody who harbors, conceals, or protects from detection an undocumented person in the state of Florida, they're liable for up to a second-degree felony charge. That was the original language that came out. And so we fought against that a lot during past legislative session, and it got watered down, whatever you want to call it, defanged. And so what it is now is that anybody who transports an undocumented person into the state of Florida, they're liable for a third-degree felony on the first charge, and then a second-degree felony if they're a repeat offender. And so that's what that law actually got changed into. But there was, if you heard about it, there was a lot of protest around that, specifically because that original language is straight out of the Fugitive Slave Act, where if somebody saw a slave or ran into a slave in the South or in the North, they had to report them to police, basically deputizing regular citizens as law enforcement. And so that's what that original language was basically deputizing citizens as immigration enforcement. And so we did a lot of advocacy against that, and so it got changed to transporting folks into the state, but it's still terrible, and we want to change it as much as possible. So I'm gonna go through it real quickly. SB 1718. It's basically all these things that you all heard. It attacked, like I said, I call it an anti-immigrant omnibus. It requires employers to use E-Verify to determine if somebody is eligible to work in this country. It took away the ability for undocumented folks to practice law in the country. It took away community ID Community ID is basically something that undocumented folks are able to use to get access to different resources, get their kids into school, and get access to different things. And then the hospital data collection portion that we were talking about, the hospitals have to report that to ACA, and ACA reports that to the legislature. What we also talked about, transporting folks into the state. We're also starting to hear different stories about people who are getting arrested for transporting folks into the state as well.
Any questions about this law or any thoughts? All right.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
So it mentioned there, and I also heard if you can provide, like if you have a license, not a Florida license, then you have, like it's not really clear, do you have to provide immigration status? Like you have to provide papers?
So,
But what if you're an American citizen with, like, let's say a New York license and that's your only form of identification at that time? What do they do?
Oh, go ahead.
So the situation with that is when it comes to driver's licenses, it was specifically to states that issued driver's licenses to undocumented people. Florida did not recognize those licenses. And so there was lots of advocacy and lawsuits. The original list was a list of 18, and now the list is only 2 states as of now. I believe it's Connecticut and Maine, if I'm not mistaken.
Minnesota. I'm not sure, actually.
I think
It's an M state.
Yeah, I think it's Maine. I think it's Connecticut and Maine. Those are the only 2 states right now where if the driver's license is issued to an undocumented person, then it's invalid in the state of Florida. But out-of-state driver's licenses overall, if you come from New York, you're a U.S. citizen, there's no issue with it.
Yes, it is specifically the driver's license issued to undocumented drivers. So if you are a person that was born here or that has legal documentation in the country, you're good. Go ahead.
Yes. So basically, I would like to know if, like, let's say I'm in Broward, in Miami-Dade County, I'm driving. I don't know what is the status of a family or something like that, and the police stop me, and they ask me, like, is this person legal? And they started questioning that person, and God forbid that person is in an illegal status. Like, do I get charged? I mean, that doesn't mean that I actually brought them from another state, but I'm just, doing them a favor to drop them somewhere else or something like that. How would that?
So with the original draft of the law, yes, you would have 100%, you yourself would have gotten in trouble, right? Not necessarily the people that you were transporting, but you yourself as the person driving them. Thankfully, thanks to all of the advocacy that we did and all of the community going up in arms, because that's not fair, if you are driving someone inside of the state, so from Broward to Miami, from Jacksonville to Pensacola, as long as it's inside of the state, you're totally fine. If you cross state lines or crossing state lines to come into Florida, that's when it is a problem. And that's when, if you brought your grandma who is undocumented from Georgia to Florida and you got pulled over, then you would get in trouble. Of course.
I just wanted to ask for a clarification. This might sound silly, but when you give a person a driver's license, they're no longer undocumented.
Some states have, that's interesting. But no, it's undocumented is specifically when it comes to
Immigration status?
Yes.
Yeah, immigration status and being inspected by the federal government. But yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. So this law went into effect on July 1st. And a lot of different things have happened in the state since. A lot of industries have really been impacted. Have any of you seen the TikTok videos of construction sites fully empty with no workers? How many of you have seen that? Raise your hands. A lot of people. What about the videos of farms, with the produce that is going bad because there are no workers? Yeah. So what kind of other impacts have you all heard about, or what shift in dynamics have you seen over this past summer whenever it comes to immigrant communities in the state, if any? Go ahead.
Something that was really, I guess, popular among the immigrant community for work was to be a substitute teacher. And the state actually changed the way that counties manage those substitute things. So now it's run by the state. And there's like a whole entire process that people have to go through, like showing their identification and also sort of other things just to be a substitute teacher.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually one point we didn't cover, but it's on the list. Oh, can you go back, David, please? One. Thank you. So now the state requires that all employers use E-Verify, which is a system to verify workers' eligibility through a system, right? The problem is that the system is super complicated and very unreliable. Like the system crashes all the time, and you have to prove like with screenshots that the system crashed. And it takes people through a process, like you said. A lot of times it spits out incorrect or unreliable information. So even if you are eligible to work, this system may deem you not able to work, right? And now you have problems because you're doing everything with legality, but you still are unable to find a job, right?
Trick questions in the system. I actually had to help my mom like fix it, like fill it out. And some of the questions were so oddly written that if you didn't really like have exactly, so if you didn't have like a background in English, there was no way that you could get those.
Yeah. That's another one of the problems, right? And there's been a lot of fear. Oh, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no worries. Another, I think, factor that might have played into it is like, I know this problem has been going on since COVID, which is the staffing in restaurants and like other places. But I feel like with this new law, it definitely scared people away from going to these places and serving other people because they just don't know who they're serving or who's going to come in through the door. So, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So it's making it harder for employees to find work, right? Because they have to go through the E-Verify process, which is difficult, lengthy, and it's making it harder for employers to find employees, you know, especially in certain industries like tourism, construction, agriculture here in the state of Florida that are our biggest industries. So there is a loss, I believe, $12.6 billion a year are estimated to be lost in the state of Florida because of this law, right? Because of the loss of workers, construction sites that don't have enough people to continue them moving forward. A lot of families out of fear have chosen to even leave the state. Have any of you heard about like the mass exodus of immigrants out of Florida over the summer? Behind you, the mic.
I have immigrant friends that their families, like, before the law was passed, they considered leaving Florida to another state. And I just thought it was so devastating that they had to, like, pick up their life and, like, go to a whole different state again, and restart over.
Yeah. And we're seeing it a lot throughout the state that out of fear, people want to be safe, right? Like we immigrated and came to the United States because to have a better life, right? To not be persecuted where we're at. And here we are having to relocate, right? Because the laws aren't always friendly and enable us to create a good life. There have been travel bans that have been issued for the state of Florida, telling people from other states that if you are an undocumented person, if sometimes even just a black or brown person, Florida is maybe not the safest place for you to come. A person of the queer community, even people that can experience pregnancy, right? Because what if they have a pregnancy complication far enough into their pregnancy, right? So there have been even travel advisories issued to other residents of the United States telling them that Florida may not be the safest place. How does that make you all feel? That you live in the state where there are warnings telling other people not to come? Pretty heavy. Go ahead.
Yes, I personally think that all these laws, like most of the new laws that are coming out, like they're like in essence violating like just like our civil rights, like our human rights to decide of what we want to do with our body, independently of our religion or whatever beliefs that we may have. We should have the right to decide what we do with our own body. No one should have control or power over what is happening. And like what is the craziest that there's like so much like corruption in other things like condominium and all that stuff, and instead of focusing on things that really matters, they're just focusing on like civilians that that they're like working to make things better and making the state better, and they just, I don't know, it's ridiculous.
No, it's true. And, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, how I feel about that. It's funny you ask, because yesterday I was like scrolling through Instagram and I saw a video of some, I don't know who she was, but she was from New York and was essentially talking about how she dislikes Ron DeSantis because of all of his policies and how she dislikes Florida. So it's really strange for me to hear this because, you know, Florida's a big state and Miami is not like the rest of Florida. Broward, like parts of Broward are not like the rest of Florida. So it just makes me think a lot of like, it's heartbreaking to hear that so many people dislike Florida because of the bad reputation we have. And we have many people that advocate for people's rights, that advocate for immigrants, that advocate for all of these communities. But our governor is like our poster child of our reputation. And it also makes me question, like, why, if there are so many people that are doing good work, why are we not seeing results, and why, like, are these like power dynamics in place, I guess?
Yeah.
Going off of that, Miami is Miami, right? Miami's not Florida. No, I'm kidding. People say that though, you know, so we're a little different. But I just wanted to mention that, yeah, I've had some friends. Someone that's part of the LGBTQ community got up and left, didn't agree with these laws either, totally relocated. And then a family, I was here a few weeks ago talking about Refugee Assistance Alliance. There's a refugee family that I was helping out, and they just could not live here any longer because of how high the rent was and how hard it was to get a job and keep a job. So that's a whole different topic. But they got up and left as well over the summer, as you were mentioning, the summer exodus, I guess, of people leaving.
And it's not so far off because this anti-immigration omnibus, like David calls it, is actually really expensive. And because of the expenses associated with it and the loss of revenue because in our different industries, then now we are at peril for like hurricane relief aid, right? Other things that we need in like taxpayer money in Florida are being used, like 12 point something million dollars to relocate migrants from other states to yet another, right? Like not even out of Florida, but from other states to another. That is all Florida taxpayers' money that impacts our economy, impacts our lifestyle and our way of life, right? I think I also saw another hand over here.
Yeah, about how we feel. I think it just as it was mentioned in the beginning, it depends a lot on who you're asking that to. Because I heard that in the beginning, you mentioned like lots of billions of dollars that are lost because of people leaving. But I think that the way, I mean, let's go back to why Ron DeSantis is there. It is there because a majority decided to vote for him. And maybe money at some point has just not, or is no longer, the biggest thing to be interested for the people that voted for him. Because we hear lots of people complaining about Florida. Some of them left. Some of them have never lived here. But it's still the majority voted for DeSantis. And they voted because of a reason. And immigration for him is a big thing. So we can think that, oh, many people voted for him because of that. because immigration right now, it's a big topic. It decides things at some point, just like abortion and other topics. So I just think it depends on who you ask to, because you hear in social media, oh, I hate Florida or whatever, and that will resonate with many more people because it's on social media. Usually that point will resonate way more with young people that usually tend to use more social media. So it depends on who you ask it, right? Is it money like the most important thing? For some people, it's not. I mean, yeah, maybe we're losing 12 billion, but what are we gonna win because of this? Because during the presentation so far, I've heard like, okay, why is this law bad? But why is it good for the people that voted for it? And I think that's something we have not talked about, because it's just, okay, if it affects people, yeah. But there has been something, I think you also asked, that has lead people to go and vote for that. And I think that basically listening to both sides will be way more interesting, because, I mean, money is a big thing. So why are people willing to sacrifice those billions of dollars for that law, or for voting for someone that promotes laws like that?
Those are good questions, right? And I don't think that money is or immigration is the only thing that people voted for our governor and our legislators in general for, right? I don't think that's the only reason, but this is one of the biggest, like a keystone part of their legislative session last year that is having an impact, right? Not just on the economic side of our state, but also like on the cultural side, with like the fear that has been raised in a lot of communities, with like the exodus, with all of the industries having to shift and change, right? So I don't think I don't think that we all knew like, oh, these legislators are going to go into power and pass the super anti-immigrant law, and that's why we're voting for them, right? There were many other reasons that bring people to the polls, but during the last legislative session, this was one of the biggest things that they did, right? And what is the benefit for the people that believe in this law? I don't dare to like try to answer that for them, right? Anything to add?
No, I think that is an interesting point, and I think if this is something that you're interested in, a couple of things. The governor's party is a party of, and I mean, I'm not going to try to get into a debate or anything about this, but a couple of things. The governor's party is a party of fiscal responsibility, and so I think we bring this point because of that point. And so if there are billions of dollars that are leaving the state, I think there's a point to be made about how is this policy fiscally responsible, right? Because we're losing workers, we're losing tax base, and we're losing actual products. We're losing like agricultural products. We're like with the travel advisory, we're losing business with people not wanting to come and do their conventions in Florida. So
we're also losing a lot of brain power.
Yeah, there's a
like
tremendous brain drain.
The
Absolutely.
state.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, and so that's another thing. And then conversely, I would definitely invite you to listen to the speeches of the sponsors who put this bill forward. Rep. Keon Michaels, Representative Bernie Jacques,
Blaise Ingoglio,
and then Senator Blaise Ingoglio on the Senate side. I definitely invite you to listen to what they said. I wouldn't, as Ana Maria said, I wouldn't venture to characterize or try to answer for them. But I think if you stack up this information along with the testimony of those individuals about why exactly they passed this bill and their motivation, I think you can get a more full picture. And I think depending on what your views are, you can make your decision based on that.
Thank you. Oh, next. So we are the Florida Immigrant Coalition. We support everyone that wants to come to Florida and live a healthy, happy, productive life. We have worked very, very hard to fight this bill, right? So to protect our communities, we have Protect the People clinics and Know Your Rights, where we teach people like the rights that they have in case they come into contact with a police officer. Protect the People clinics help individuals protect their families in case they have to leave the state, right? Or maybe if like an undocumented family that has children that were born in the U.S., how to have all of your plans together, you know, like how to protect yourself, how to protect your family. We also have our Decline to Answer campaign, is very big right now. And it is where we are teaching everybody to decline to answer the healthcare questions whenever we go to the hospital so that we can protect ourselves and our resources. We are also doing a lot of community outreach, right? Educating everybody around the state around the impacts that this law can have and how we can band together to create change, right? Regardless of what that change looks like. Maybe this is not the best solution for the challenges that we're experiencing, but together we can work for better solutions. Right now, we are doing something very important, and it is speaking directly with legislators. The Florida legislative session starts in January of next year. And right now, delegation meetings are going on. And those are meetings where our legislators ask the community what we want to see from them during the next session. So delegation meetings are going on right now in each Florida county. Here in Miami-Dade, or if you live in Broward or somewhere in the area, we encourage you to sign up to speak about the things that you want to see out of your legislators. We have longer trainings that you can sign up for, where you can learn everything about the delegations. We help you with talking points, we prepare you, right, so that you feel really, really comfortable going into that space. We have done demonstrations across the state, right? A lot of farm workers, construction workers, just people all across the state demonstrating and mobilizing towards this purpose. I don't know if anyone heard about June 1st or July 1st, just thousands of people mobilizing across the state to be against this law. And very importantly, the policy team is also working on a new Welcoming Act, which is a bill proposal that will be in session next legislative session starting in January, where we can, it's a way to address the concerns of the legislature, of the reasons why they said that they wanted to pass this law. So it's a way to address those concerns while still being very friendly to our immigrant communities in the state. So David, please take it away.
Thank you, Ana Maria. So as Ana Maria said, we're working on a pro-immigrant policy proposal, bill proposal for this upcoming session. And so what it's going through right now, it's going through the bill drafting process on the House side so that we can get the language for it. But what I'm going to do right now is sort of break down the different sections, or at least talk through the different sections that we're proposing right now. So this is a 24 section bill. As
very
we have
robust.
Yeah, very
The anti-immigrant
very
law
robust.
was very robust, so this answer to it is also very robust.
Yeah, I think they had 19 or 20 in there, so we had to get some extra sections in there. So as we have it, the first section is basically outlining the intent of the bill, stating the language. So what we have is what we call the Florida Way. And the Florida Way from Flick is about making Florida more welcoming and being more neighborly and being, just being the true embodiment of what it is to be a Floridian, and not necessarily what our legislative leaders have portrayed what being a Floridian is about. So within that framework, we came up with this Welcoming Act about how can we do that legislatively, those principles of being welcoming and being neighborly throughout Florida. So the first section just basically explains the intent of the bill. Section 2 and 3 basically adds immigrants to the Civil Rights Act that Florida passed in 1992. This basically just makes immigrants a protected class where you cannot discriminate against them. You cannot discriminate against somebody based on their immigration status specifically, because we have protections for based on gender, based on race, and these different things. And so adding immigration status to that as a protected class. Next, we basically taking back Florida to the pre-1718 framework when it comes to E-Verify, where private employers have to submit it if they have 25 or more. We basically just repealing that, including the repeal for the 1718 portion in there.
So the repeal from that position that you spoke about people having to go through the eligibility process in order to find a job. So this bill repeals that. So it will be easier for people to find jobs again.
Precisely. And the next section, section 5, we talk about community ID funding. What we basically do now, what the governor did was take away the funding it banned local municipalities from being able to fund community IDs. And so this creates a $5 million general fund in the Department of Commerce, where the state is basically funding that, and the different municipalities can apply for grant funding to get community IDs in their local municipalities. Sections 6 and 7 reinstates the ability for undocumented folks to be able to practice law, and then it also adds a section where you can't discriminate on somebody, you can't discriminate against somebody to get a professional license based on their immigration status.
Question?
I guess it just confuses me with section 6 and 7, with the ability for someone who is here illegally to then either prosecute someone for crimes or defend someone for crimes when them themselves are currently committing a crime.
Well, it says undocumented, not illegally. So those are two separate things. And so when we talk about somebody who's undocumented, one, this was something that was already in the law, where folks were able to practice law if they were undocumented. And when we talk about prosecuting, this isn't prosecuting. A lot of these folks are, go ahead.
No, go finish.
A lot of these folks are defending folks in immigration cases, and they're providing those resources to their communities as well. So it's not a case where folks are prosecuting people for crime, but you're basically expanding the opportunity for folks in the undocumented community to get access to legal representation.
But it does allow them to get a license to become a prosecutor.
Not anymore. So before this law, Governor Rick Scott actually passed this into law that said that a person who is undocumented can pass the bar and practice the Florida bar. And the reason for this is that over 68% of immigrants that go to court go without a lawyer. So as immigrants, we are in a huge disadvantage whenever we're facing any legal procedure. So Governor Rick Scott implemented this law that somebody that is undocumented can still practice in the Florida bar. But this law repeals, the 1718 law repeals this, which means that now even less access for immigrant communities to show up to court.
Okay. And then just to clarify, 'cause I'm not well-versed in the language, what exactly differs, like what exactly is undocumented, I guess, versus people who cross illegally?
That's a really great question, and it's a little bit nebulous, but the definition, like the legal statewide definition, is a person that came into the state and was inspected at the border and was authorized to come in or was not authorized to come in.
Yeah, so we talk about inspected at the border. I think that's what folks generally consider as illegal or whatever it is. I think we don't necessarily use that language. But this also includes folks who overstay visas and different things like that. So that's that's more of a political term, but the actual term, when you talk about folks who are inspected versus non-inspected, folks who overstay visas and different things like that, those are individuals who are considered undocumented generally.
Okay.
Question? Oh, I'm sorry. Were you finished?
Oh, yeah, I think for now, yeah.
Okay.
So, sorry if this is off topic because it doesn't pertain to Florida, but someone did mention New York and I just saw they declared a state of emergency for the migrant crisis there. What would be your solution to that?
I have no idea what's going on at that situation. I honestly don't know.
I don't know that I have a solution, right? I think that it's not the only, right now New York is facing some challenges, right, that are concurring. The immigration coming, or immigrants coming to New York is now deemed an emergency because there is no place to shelter them. So I think that goes into like the housing challenges that are also going on in New York at this moment, plus many other things. So I don't know what the solution is, to be honest. Yeah.
I know we've got 10 minutes I know some folks came in between classes or scheduled us in between classes, so you're free to go with, okay, yeah. Okay, 10 minutes, okay, sorry. So section 8 and 7 on the Welcoming Act, basically allowing undocumented folks. This is another thing where we're going back to the pre-1718 context, allowing undocumented folks to be able to pay in-state tuition and expanding their eligibility to financial aid services, if their parents pay into different things, to be able to allow undocumented folks to be able to get access to those resources as well. The next sections are about houseless youth being able to get access to school in the locations that's closest to them physically. This next section is about 287G. So 287G agreements are basically where local law enforcement enters into an agreement with the Department of Defense, with ICE, where if they get an undocumented person, if they sort of arrest an undocumented person, ICE issues a detainer, and then even after that person is sort of set to be released from jail, that local law enforcement can still hold them for up to 24 hours for ICE to come and retrieve that person, move them through different processes. And so what actually happens is a lot of time ICE doesn't show up. A lot of times ICE doesn't show up, and then there's also some legal issues around if a law enforcement agency is releasing somebody and the federal government just tells them to hold on to them for a little extra while. What is the legality around that? And we've just seen that 287G agreements aren't very useful, and lots of institutions on both sides of the aisle have declared them pretty much useless. So that's what that section is addressing. I'm going to try to go through the rest of these pretty quickly, hit some of the top lines. Next, we're getting this is around universal representation for folks who are potential victims of crime to be able to get access to legal defense services. 15 and 16 is around U visas. U visas are a type of visas that folks who are witness to a crime are able to get. That allows them to move through the legalization process if they're cooperating with law enforcement on some sort of crime that they witnessed. Section 17 is really around some different repeals. Previous legislatures passed things around making sanctuary cities illegal, that's what those things are. Repealing some of the language around safe harbor for in different counties. Section 18 is around immigrant youth, undocumented youth, not being able to be denied medical services and child care services based on their immigration status, which currently happens in Florida. Next is the repeal of the hospital data collection section that we were talking about. The next section is around the exceptions for human smuggling. This was something that we were talking about before, basically bringing Florida back to the pre-1718 context when it comes to our definition of human smuggling. Next thing is about how law enforcement are able to collect data from qualified offenders, because right now on 1718, once somebody is in law enforcement custody, they're able to collect DNA from them in whatever ways possible, and they can take it by force. And so this section basically says that folks can deny that DNA request and not be subject to further punishment. The next one is about non-licensed attorneys practicing law. As Ana Maria said, a lot of folks who go through the process don't go through it without representation, and they're often dealing with somebody who's just a notario, a notary public, or somebody who's an aide in a law office who is trying to represent them on immigration cases. And so this is just creating a framework around and protecting folks who are going through that process to stop that kind of fraud that exists. The next one is, I think the next top line one is around the Office of New Americans. The Office of New Americans would basically be created under the Department of Commerce, and this is an office that other states around the country have, and that office provides recommendations and policy prescriptions to the government about how to deal with migrant communities that are coming to the state, immigrant communities that are coming to the state, how you can support language access initiatives, and just analyzing any trends about the communities that are coming into the state, about how the state can better serve them and their needs. And so that's creating that Office of the New Americans under the Department of Commerce. So that's the city of Miami actually has an Office of New Americans, which we're very proud to have worked with them for, and we want to basically scale that model to the entire state. So that's the Welcoming Act, as I said, that we're proposing. It's in the House. It's in House bill drafting right now, and once it comes out of bill drafting, we'll get it over to the Senate for them to for it to get written there. And so the sponsors that we have are Rep. Dodie Joseph and Senator Victor Torres on the Senate side that are going to be sponsoring this bill. So
yeah. So the bill is our legislative solution, right? Like how we push forward on the legislative field, right? So that we can come together to better solutions. And on the advocacy side, we are out speaking with everybody. We are knocking on doors, making phone calls, going to community events. We are educating our communities, and we are speaking directly with legislators. So if you want to get involved, if you want more information, to learn more, to come to our info sessions, if you really liked the Decline to Answer campaign, or you really want to get involved with the policy side of things, we would love to have you. If you scan these QR codes, one is for you to be able to volunteer with the Florida Immigrant Coalition. We are the civic engagement department, but we do many services. Like we do citizenship drives where we process, where we help people fill out their citizenship applications. We have TPS clinics, so you can get involved with any of our efforts. We would love for you to do so. And if you want to speak directly with your legislators, attend the delegation meetings. Please scan the QR code for delegation meetings, and we would be happy to train you and to speak to you. And one thing I just realized is that I did not put our contact information. My bad. But I would be happy to provide it to you all so that we can keep in contact and you all can get more involved. Do you have any questions? Comments?
I had a question regarding, I think it was section G13. You guys had mentioned a scenario where if these undocumented people were to be incarcerated, once they were released, that ICE, maybe I misunderstood, but
287G?
I'm sorry?
The 287Gs? Yeah.
What happens if ICE doesn't show up? And what happens if they do? You didn't really go past that.
If they're released, they're free to go. They just have to be held for an extra 24 hours if ICE requests it.
Free to go back into...
To home.
But weren't they arrested because they were undocumented in the first place?
No.
I think that was a scenario that you gave. Then
no. The scenario was if the person, so say somebody, I don't know, somebody hits you, right? Somebody gets in a fight with you and then they go to jail for... Well, I mean, that's probably not a good example. Somebody shoplifts something, and then they go to jail, and then they get run to the system, and then ICE gives a call to the police department and say, hey, you're about to release this person, or they've gone through the process. Can you hold them for an extra 24 hours for me to come pick them up? And so once that person is free to go, they've dealt with their whatever shoplifting thing, ICE tells them to hold them for an extra 24 hours. And so if ICE doesn't show up, then that person is free to go.
But ICE would only get involved in the first place if that person was undocumented, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when they get
Exactly.
the call.
So then once they're released, they have the option to try to get their documents, or
No.
so then they're just undocumented again until they, forever, I guess.
I'm trying to understand. What's your question?
So no, because I don't understand what happens, like, if they're undocumented and ICE doesn't get involved, and then, God forbid, these people say that were to happen, what would happen the second time around?
So whenever somebody gets arrested for shoplifting in this scenario and they have a detainer on them, now there's a detainer on their name, right? So like ICE didn't come and pick them up in those 24 hours. But if they were to get arrested again, like it would show that there's a detainer on their name, right? So then immigration would be probably involved a little bit sooner. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, I was just like wondering like what kind of repercussions would happen for an undocumented person that and then is released. That's it.
So
So I think we kind of addressed it, but we can keep the conversation going. Nobody is kicking us out, but it is 1:31, so if you scheduled us between your classes, thank you so much for being here. A quick plug for next week. We have spooky season is officially upon us. Next week is Halloween, October 31st. We've got a great session for you on AI, so artificial intelligence, specifically in higher education. So how AI has kind of made its way into higher ed in admissions, in assessments, and all the ways that we're seeing it affect our lives every day. Thank you so much. A warm round of applause for our speakers.
Thank you, everybody.
So much for being here, and hopefully we see you again next week. Have a nice day.
And we'll stick back in case anybody has any questions or would like our contact information.
Absolutely.